We've been talking for the last few weeks about some things from the book of Genesis. The book of beginnings, all kinds of beginnings in the book of Genesis. And one of the persons that we are introduced to in this great book is this fellow by the name of Abraham. Abraham is referred to as the father of the faithful and the friend of God. Abraham is a man who constantly displayed his faith, not by saying, I believe, but by acting the way he believed. He showed his faith by what he did. And it reminds us of James' statement, show me your faith apart from your works, and I, by my works, will show you my faith. Our faith is demonstrated as trust when our lives are committed, when we actually are doing what we believe, not just passively going along in life where people would really not know if we are believers or unbelievers or we are this, that, or the other. But there's something about faith that says, I trust. I have confidence. I'm willing to commit my life. As was mentioned this morning in our Bible class, it's a leap of faith. No, I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I trust in God to carry me through it. Faith is more than just the acknowledgement of one's belief. Oh, I can say, yes, I believe in God. And going back again to James' statement in the second chapter of James, James says, that's the devil's faith. That's literally what he said. He said, you say you have faith, you believe. He says the devil believe and they tremble. You see, what I believe is not what makes the ultimate difference. I can say, yes, I believe there is a God, but in my life I say, but I don't want him to have anything to do with my life. Yes, I believe Jesus is the Son of God, but he's not going to guide my life. I'm going to guide it myself. You see, that's faith in a sense, because it says, I believe a certain thing, and I may be genuine in that belief. But then it goes to a different level when we think of faith along the line of trust and confidence. Trust doesn't just say, I believe. Trust says, this is the way I live. This is a commitment that I have. It isn't intellectual with me, it's my whole being. It isn't what my intellect tells me is true because of the evidence that I see, but it's what my commitment says I must do because I trust, because I have confidence. And so faith is a many-faceted thing. You know, someone wrote a song, love is a many-splendored thing. Let me tell you something. Faith is a many-splendored thing too. It has so many dimensions to it. And it's such a lovely, beautiful, and wonderful thing. Abraham, his faith was tested. Now let's get just a little bit of background again on Abraham, because we need to bring ourselves up to date with the statement that I'm going to read in just a moment. God said to Abraham in the 12th chapter of Genesis, and we'll come back to this later, Abraham, get out of your father's house, away from your kindred, go to a land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and those who bless you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be cursed. And then he says, and in your seed, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Keep that in mind for just a minute. Abraham's 75 years old at this time, and he and his wife Sarah had no children. But in your seed, all the families of the earth will be blessed. 25 years later, his wife Sarah had a child named Isaac. Well, there were some intervening things here that Abraham was confused. Lord, why can't I have a child with Hagar? I'll help you out on that one, Lord. I'll have a child with Hagar because Sarah can't have any children. And then later, God renewed this promise, and Abraham says, hey, God, why don't we just do this through Hagar? He says, no, Sarah's going to have a child. Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him for righteousness. Beautiful statement. He trusted God. He didn't know how it was going to happen. But he says, Lord, if you say that's the way it is, that's the way it is. I will live my life devoted to that idea and ideal. Now, time moves on. Isaac is born. Isaac grows. He's 13 years old. Listen to this. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, get this, get the force of this. God said, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to a region of Moriah. Sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will tell you about. Boy, that's heavy. Wait a minute, Lord. I can't do that. He's my kid. He's my child. I love him. I'm not going to kill him. Well, perhaps, we don't know this for sure, but perhaps some of the pagan people around him offered human sacrifices. We know that they did later. And now, Lord, you, a God of compassion and love, you want me to offer my son? Well, wait a minute, there's something else here, Lord. You told me that through Isaac you would bring about this promise. And now you tell me to kill him. Well, when we get over to the book of Hebrews, we find something about this whole idea of trust. Because over in the book of Hebrews, when the Lord said, when the writer of Hebrews said that the Lord told Abraham to offer his son, he says, by faith, Abraham did this. And then he says, he who received the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Listen to this now. Abraham reasoned that God could raise him from the dead. And figuratively speaking, he received them from the dead, didn't he? There's a real challenge to one's faith. There's a real test of a man's faith. And that's where it shows something of just exactly how important trust is. Not just intellectual belief, but commitment. That leap of faith. That leap of faith that says, I don't know where it's leading. I don't know where it's going. But this is right. I will do it. Not because I like it. Not because I want it. Not because it appears to me to be the best thing. Not because it's popular. But because it's right. I will do it because it's right. I don't know where it's going to lead. And it may lead to trouble for me personally. It may lead to my persecution. It may even lead to my death. But it's right. And I will stand for what's right. That's a tough one. That is really a tough one. Your faith and my faith are not going to be tried like that. But now, let's go back. Let's go back to Abraham and over in that 12th chapter that I read a moment ago. Get out of your father's house, away from your kindred. Go to a land that I'll show you. Where's that land, Lord? I'm not going to tell you. Basically, that's what happened here. Because the writer of Hebrews says when he went out, he did not know where he was going. But what? He trusted. God said this, and he trusted. Over and over and over. The faith of Abraham is trusted that way. Is shown that way. The trust of Abraham is shown that way. You see, it wasn't just, yes, God, I believe you. It was, yes, God, I'm committed to you. It was, yes, God, I trust you. I don't know where you want me to go. I'm just going to follow you. Well, there was another time. In the life of Abraham, he had a fellow by the name of Lot. It was his nephew. And his nephew was kind of a selfish guy because they had a lot of flocks, and Lot had a lot of flocks and herds, and Abraham had a lot of flocks and herds, and they had these herdsmen taking care of them, and the herdsmen got into a big squabble. We don't know exactly what it is, but Abraham says, hold it, Lot. You know, we ought not to be having, we're kin people, we ought not to be having these quarrels. So I'll tell you what we'll do. Look out, you just choose whatever area you want to go to. If you go that way, I'll go over here. If you go over here, I'll go over there. Well, Lot looked around. Unfortunately, I think I'm a lot like Lot at this point. He looks around, he says, wow, boy, that's a good area over there, isn't it? That's not such a good area over there. Well, he gave me a choice. I'll take the best. Isn't that the way, that's the way I feel. Isn't that the way some of us feel, you know? I'll take the best. He did give me a choice, didn't he? And so Lot did. He took the best. And then God appeared to Abraham, spoke to him again, and he said, Abraham, just lift up your eyes. Look all around here. I'm going to give this whole land to your descendants. Okay? You see, faith, when it's tested, along the line somewhere, I hate to use this word, but along the line somewhere it pays off. Maybe not monetarily, maybe not in a promotion, maybe not in more prestige, but somehow or another it pays off so that we gain so much from it because we have trusted in the Lord. Now, God doesn't speak to us personally like he did to Abraham, but hey, that's the reason we got this. Because he speaks to us through his word. And speaking to us through his word, I'm under the same obligations and responsibilities for trust as Abraham was. Well, go offer your son Isaac on the altar. I don't want to do that, Lord. That's my son. I love him. God didn't say, that's okay, I'll raise him from the dead. He didn't say, that's okay, I'll take care of it. He just says, go do it. Well, Abraham waited about 6 months before he decided to do this. No, you didn't read the next verse. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and he saddled his donkey. He took with him 2 servants and his son Isaac. They cut enough wood for the burnt offering. The next morning, he didn't say, oh, well, time doesn't make any difference here. Wait a few months. Maybe God will change his mind. I'd like to have just a few more months with my son. No. Early the next morning, he got up and he set out for Mount Moriah. Isaac was not just some little 3-year-old kid. Isaac was 13 years old by this time. And Isaac says to his father, says, Dad, I don't think he called him Dad, but something kind of like that. Said, Dad, we've got the wood, but we don't have a lamb. What are you going to offer? You're going over here to offer this sacrifice, and you don't have an animal to sacrifice. What would you have done? Isn't this a horrible story? Abraham said, Isaac, God will provide. God will provide. I have no idea what was going through Abraham's mind at that time. I can imagine a lot of things, and I think you and I can all imagine a lot of things. But the point was, Abraham said, God will provide. Abraham could have said, you're the one that God's going to provide. No, he just said God will provide. They got to Mount Moriah, and I've pictured this so many times. I just don't know how this could be. Abraham now is about 113 years old. Isaac is 13 years old. And now he binds Isaac, puts him on the altar. He's just getting ready to kill him so that he can offer him as a burnt offering. And God says, hold it. Hold it right there, Abraham. Now I know that you fear me. There's all kind of things wrapped up in this idea. I know that you fear me. I know you trust me. I know you love me more even than your own son. I know you're willing to sacrifice that which is the closest to you. I know that I mean more to you, Abraham, than anything else in all the world. God could have been saying all of that to Abraham, or all of those things could have been transpiring. But God says, now I know. I know that you fear me. Folks, if I had to do that, if I had to go through that kind of hell, would my faith stand it? If God had spoken to me, if I had been in Abraham's place, and God had spoken to me. You see, they didn't have a written word at that time. God directed them. And God said, Jack, go take Steve, your oldest boy. Go take Steve. Offer him as a sacrifice. Nothing doing. Nothing doing. I'm religious, but I'm not a fanatic. No, Abraham went ahead and did it. Or he attempted to do it. The temptations to my faith are so different from this. When Paul wrote to the Romans, he says, what shall we say then that Abraham, our forefathers, discovered in this matter? If in fact Abraham was justified by works, he had something to boast about, but not before God. The scripture says Abraham believed God and it was credited to him for righteousness. Oh, that is so misunderstood. It's misunderstood so many times. Paul is using this word faith. He uses this word faith to mean commitment and trust. And commitment and trust necessitates obedience. There's no such thing as really trusting in someone that we don't follow when he directs us. There's no such thing as trusting in God when we don't obey him. We can ignore the commandments we don't like, and some of them I don't like. We can ignore the regulations that we don't agree with, but there's some I don't agree with. But trust says, whether I like it or not, I do it. Or I ought to do it. Whether I enjoy it or not, trust says I have to do it. That's the test that comes to faith. No, we're not going to be asked to offer our sons and daughters the sacrifices. How is your faith tested? Well, the devil is such a clever guy. A long time ago, he threw away that red suit. He threw away his pitchfork. He threw away the forked tail and the horns and all that, threw all that stuff away. And you know what he did? He put on the clothing of an angel of light. Now that's not quite literally what the Bible says, but Paul says, number one, the devil like a roaring lion goes about seeing whom he may devour. But he also says, Peter says, the devil transforms himself into an angel of light. Isn't that the culture that we live in? Nothing wrong with this. Everybody's doing it. It's fun. Be a part of the crowd. Test to our faith. They're so very subtle. And their subtlety sometimes is the very thing that catches us. No, I haven't had any severe challenges to my faith like Abraham has. I don't know, I'm afraid I'd flunk. I think sometime of missionaries that go into foreign countries. You've known some of them, I've known some of them. They don't know what life is going to be like. The husband of my wife's niece, her nephew by marriage, he became a preacher. He got very interested in going to New Guinea. He and his wife and 3 children got on a plane, never been there before, got on a plane. They went to New Guinea. And he preached and he taught. He didn't know what life would be like over there, but whatever it was, he was willing to do it. They had a little baby over there. The baby was just really an infant. The baby got sick. And because it was such a primitive culture that it was in, they did not have the equipment to minister to that baby. And the baby died. All they needed was a very, very small needle to put into that very, very small vein. And they didn't have a needle that was little enough. And the baby died. You see, that kind of commitment, that kind of trust, that kind of faith is the faith of Abraham. Abraham went out not knowing where he was going. Rex and Brenda, they went out not knowing what life would hold. No, it didn't hold a big bed of roses. It held grief and it held sorrow. When they came back from New Guinea, they had to leave a little baby over there, buried in the sands of that remote island. They came back. Oh, they could have said, why did God let that happen to us while we were trying to preach and teach to those who needed us? Why did God let that happen? I don't want anything to do with a God like that. No. They came back to Miami, Florida. The big Spanish population in Miami. They came back to Miami. And Rex said, I want to learn Spanish so that I can work with the Spanish people. And he did. He went to school, he learned Spanish, and he became very fluent in Spanish, and he worked all among the Spanish people. Oh, he didn't make any money much. He got along okay. But you see, trust. Trust doesn't say, okay, if it works out the way I want it to. Okay if I enjoy it. Okay if it pays off. No, trust says, I will offer my son. Trust says, I will obey. Trust doesn't say, what's in it for me? What are the challenges to my faith, to your faith? One of the challenges is personal integrity. All around us we are challenged to lie or cheat. And it's kind of, if you get away with it, that's okay. I heard the accountant say one time that anything is deductible from your income tax as long as they don't catch you. Well, and so some people, that's a chance they take. So the idea of cheating is, well, now just stop and think for a moment. One of the big problems in universities all over the world is the problem of cheating. When I was teaching in Vienna, Austria, we had students who would cheat. At Pepperdine University, they have students who cheat. At UCLA, they have students who cheat. At Burbank High, they have students who cheat. Well, as long as I don't get caught, that's okay. No, it ain't okay. It is not okay. This is a challenge to one's faith. Oh, but I may make a better grade. So what? Don't allow your faith to fail because you think you won't get caught. Immorality is all around us. It's a challenge to our faith. Well, everybody does this. The Congress has passed a law. It's just okay. The Constitution doesn't forbid it. After all, it's between consenting adults. And we've got all of these cliches that don't come down to the biblical idea of morality. And because society approves, we approve. This is a challenge to our faith. How much am I willing to give up for my faith? Abraham said, I'll give up my son. How much am I willing to give up for my faith? Maybe a couple of dollars. Integrity, morality, these things are challenges to our faith. Personal responsibility, it's a challenge to our faith. Well, if something goes wrong and I'm responsible, I can always find somebody else to blame it on. I will not take responsibility for it because, well, a number of things. My stock goes down in the minds of some people. I'm embarrassed. By the way, you see, these things, they circulate around me. Not around what is right, not around biblical principle, but they circulate around me. And so this makes this a very difficult subject for me. It makes this for a subject that is hard to talk about, that's hard to practice. It's insulting to us sometimes. It's uncomfortable to us. Why? Because we don't trust. Because faith is failing. Abraham says, I'll get up the next morning and start off toward Mount Moriah. Oh, that's a tough one. No, God has never commanded that of me. But the devil is such a tricky guy. Like I said, he took off that crazy red suit that I never liked anyway, and he threw his pitchfork away, and now he's dressed up like this angel of light. And he says, Jack, everybody's doing this. Jack, it couldn't possibly be anything evil about this. After all, it's acceptable by everybody. And I have to come back and say, well, wait a minute. Is it acceptable to God? And that's a tough one. That's where the rubber meets the road, folks. That's exactly where I need to be. So, test to your faith and my faith. Oh, they're all around us. They're everywhere. They're not easy. They're demanding. It's more than the intellect. It's the person. It's you as a whole. And he doesn't ask for part of you. He doesn't ask for a piece of you. He asks for all of you. Your whole life. A life of trust. So if you're not a Christian today, that's his invitation. And you know, this is a strange thing. That's his invitation to you, but these are his demands on you. He not only invites you, but he makes demands on you. Come to me, he says, all you who labor and are heavy laden, I'll give you rest. Then he says, take my yoke on you and learn of me. The yoke is that thing that fits over the ox's neck, you know, so that he can pull the carriage, so he can pull the load. Take my yoke on you and learn of me. And then he says, hey, I'm gentle. I'm lowly in heart. And you'll find peace, rest unto your soul. If you're not a Christian, you can turn away from sin and in the trust that's in your heart be buried with him in baptism. Put him on. Have your sins forgiven. Be raised to walk in a new life. If that's your desire today, we invite you to come while we stand together and sing, please.